Carl Jung knew there are truths so profound that they can only be protected by being forgotten, and there are others so dangerous that they can only survive disguised as religion. Have you ever felt that your faith is fragmented? That the words you have heard about God have never touched the deepest part of your soul? As if something were missing. An invisible thread that connects all beliefs, all traditions, all myths, and that no one dares to name. Perhaps you have spent your life listening to prayers that awakened nothing. Perhaps you have memorized verses without ever feeling the presence they promised. Or maybe, at some point of rupture, you looked up at the sky in silence and asked yourself, what is missing? Jung asked himself this question, and the answer did not come from theology, but from the unconscious. It came from dreams, from visions, from archaic symbols that returned like ghosts, insistently asking to be remembered. And what he discovered destroys the veil that separates faith and psyche. It destroys the illusion that religion and science are opposites. It destroys the superficial narrative that has been sold to us about Jesus, the Christ. Because Jesus was never just a moral teacher. He was a revealer of archetypal codes, a living mirror of the principles that sustain the universe, behind matter, form, and mind. And these principles did not arise in Jerusalem. They are older than any scripture, older than time itself. They were whispered in Hermetic papyri, encoded by Hermes Trismegistus, guarded by occultists, alchemists, and forgotten prophets. But Jesus lived them, not with enigmatic words, but with gestures, with healings, with silences that restored, with paradoxes that confused reason, but awakened the spirit. Jung understood that the deepest teachings are not those that comfort. They are those that destabilize, those that break the ego, that challenge logic, that open portals to the unconscious. And that is how he rediscovered the 7 laws that govern creation, 7 Hermetic principles, 7 spiritual keys, 7 mirrors of the self, but not as dogmas, as internal experiences that Jesus embodied to reveal that the kingdom of heaven is not outside, it is within. You kneel in a temple, seeking God on high, while your soul cries out, suffocated, unable to bear any longer this illusory separation between matter and spirit. What you feel is the collapse of the paradigm, the breaking of childish religion, the dark call to access the wisdom that has been hidden, not out of malice, but because you were not yet ready. Now maybe you are. And if you are, you need to know Jesus did not come to teach religion. He came to reactivate the codes of the self, and Jung deciphered the maps that faith forgot. Modern ignorance is not in not knowing. It is in thinking you already understand. Carl Jung watched with concern a humanity obsessed with certainties, reducing reality to what is visible, measurable, predictable. But beneath the skin of reason, he saw something pulsing, a forgotten abyss. And in that abyss, the echo of 7 laws that do not belong to any religion, but sustain them all. These laws do not ask for faith, they ask for courage. Courage to admit that reality is symbolic. That the world you see is not the world as it is, but as your mind projects it. The first of these laws is the principle of mentalism. The whole is mind. The universe is mental. Reality is born from consciousness, not matter. Jung saw this in the delusions of schizophrenics, in the dreams of his patients, in the myths that are repeated in all cultures. The psyche shapes the world. What you think, feel, and desire, you create. Jesus did not explain this with Hermetic words. He lived it with authority. When he said, "If you have faith as small as a mustard seed, you can say to this mountain, 'Move,' and it will move," he was not talking about miracles, but about creation. because whoever controls the mind bends reality. But what have you done with it? You have turned your mind into a minefield. You have become sick with automatic thoughts. You have become a slave to ideas that are not yours. And now, you live trapped in realities that you yourself have created, but you blame others for not being able to escape. The second principle is that of correspondence. As above, so below. As within, so without. Jung translated this as synchronicity. Jesus called it the kingdom of God within you. But you keep looking for answers outside, in gurus, in courses, in promises. Meanwhile, the universe responds cruelly to your inner incoherence. You feel rejected, and you are rejected. You believe that love hurts, and you find relationships that bleed you dry. You carry ancestral guilt and attract invisible punishments. Because reality mirrors the unconscious, you build the hell you later beg to escape. But there is no way out. The third law is that of rhythm. Everything flows. Everything has tides. You live trapped in the illusion of stability. But your soul is made of cycles, of symbolic deaths, of new beginnings that scare you but heal you. Jesus understood this rhythm. When he said that there is a time to plant and a time to harvest, he was not talking about agriculture. He was talking about the soul. But the modern ego wants constancy. It wants permanent happiness. It wants continuous pleasure. And because of this, it lives frustrated. You have lost your sense of sacred time. You have forgotten that night is also necessary, that there are days when silence heals more than words. The fourth law is the principle of vibration. Nothing is still. Everything vibrates. Jung saw this in how dense emotions make the body sick. Jesus saw this when he healed with a touch. He did not nullify reality. He reordered it. Peace, calm down, he said to the storms, and they ceased. It wasn't magic. It was vibrational alignment with the source. But what about you? You vibrate fear, and you attract chaos. You vibrate scarcity, and you live in lack. You vibrate rejection, and you build emotional prisons, calling them destiny. The fifth law is the principle of polarity. Everything is dual. Everything has poles. Jesus said, "The last shall be first." Jung said, "There is no awakening without pain." But you run from pain as if it were a mistake. You seek only the good side of life. And because of that, you remain on the surface. You don't want to be whole. You just want to be happy. But happiness without shadow is an illusion. You need to fall, to rise with awareness. You need to lose, to understand what you have. You need to die, to be reborn differently. The sixth law is the principle of cause and effect. Nothing happens by chance. Every action has a reaction. Jesus said, "Whatever a man sows, that he will also reap." Jung called this psychic compensation. You are not a victim, you are the author. Every choice you make shapes the collective unconscious. Every omission has a price. Every hidden thought takes shape. You are not where you are as punishment. You are there as a consequence. And finally, the seventh principle, gender. Everything carries both masculine and feminine. Creation depends on the union of these forces. Jung saw this in the anima and animus. Jesus embodied this in the fusion of strength and tenderness, sword and compassion. But you live divided. Either you harden yourself until you lose your soul, or you surrender until you lose your identity. You need to integrate. Don't become a middle ground, but find the point where opposites dance and create. These 7 principles are not formulas. They are mirrors, mirrors of your inner state. And as long as you refuse to face them, you will continue to live in imbalance. Jung said, "There is no awakening of consciousness without pain. People will do anything but face their own soul. But now that you know, ignorance is no longer an excuse. pain is the door. And on the other side of it is the self, waiting for you to abandon comfort and enter. You try to apply everything you've learned. You make affirmations, meditate, repeat phrases of faith. But something inside you keeps screaming, a hunger that no mantra can satisfy. Because the soul doesn't want comfort, it wants integration. And integration only comes after collapse. Carl Jung saw this every day. Intelligent, cultured, spiritual people, but emotionally in ruins. They knew the right words, but they lived like psychic zombies, dominated by forces they didn't understand. Forces that are not outside, but inside. A woman goes into crisis because she has been betrayed. She cries, hates, swears never to love again. But 2 years later, she's in the same cycle. Another man, another betrayal, another pain. She says, "I'm cursed." But Jung would ask, what in you is attracting the opposite of your consciousness? Which wounded archetype is determining your pattern? The answer lies in the second Hermetic principle, correspondence. As within, so without. She says she wants love, but she carries the unconscious belief that love hurts. And the universe, obediently, reproduces exactly that, not as punishment, but as a mirror. Another example. A man repeats that he wants to prosper. He takes courses, plans, visualizes, but he lives in financial chaos. He has debts, sabotages himself, and is afraid of receiving. Jung would look beyond the money. He would see the hidden pattern, guilt for growing up, fear of surpassing his father, an infantile self-image that associates success with loss of affection. And that? It's vibration. The third principle, nothing is still. Everything vibrates. It doesn't matter what he says. What matters is what he feels when he is alone. What matters is what his body expresses when he opens his credit card bill. What matters is the tremor in his voice when he says, "Everything is fine." Because the universe does not respond to speech, it responds to frequency. Now imagine you are standing in front of the bathroom mirror. It is 3 in the morning. You cannot sleep. Your eyes are red. Your body is exhausted. Thoughts circling like hungry wolves. You repeat, "I am at peace." But your soul laughs, because the vibration of your unconscious screams the opposite. You are ashamed of your pain. You mask it with productivity. You hide it with social media. You deny it with irony. But the pain does not go away. It turns into symptoms, anxiety, crises, toxic relationships, sabotage. And then one day, you collapse, alone, in the dark, kneeling, like a child who no longer knows the way home. It is at this point that the fourth principle, polarity, reveals itself. You cannot live in the light without passing through the shadow. You cannot find peace without diving into chaos. You cannot be born again without first accepting that you are dying. Jesus knew this when he said, "Whoever wants to save their life will lose it, but whoever loses their life for my sake will find it." Jung saw the same law at work in dreams. In the psyche, everything is dual. Every trauma carries its remedy. Every fall points to a rebirth, but you resist. You only want the good part. You want a miracle without the cross. You want expansion without silence. So you live like a leaf in the wind, reactive, fickle, stuck on the pendulum of opposites, never finding the center. We call this movement rhythm. The fifth principle, eternal return. The tide rises and falls until you learn to surf, but instead, you struggle. You blame yourself. You compare yourself to others. You believe that others are moving forward while you sink, and that belief is a seed. Because everything you believe, you plant, and everything you plant, you reap. The sixth principle, cause and effect. You think no one sees your thoughts, but the universe sees. The psyche records. The unconscious responds. You hide, but you vibrate abandonment. You pretend maturity, but you vibrate neediness. You claim you have forgiven, but you vibrate hurt. And the universe? It obeys. Relentless, cold, fair. Every resentment you carry delays your healing. Every judgment cuts off your own freedom. Every escape brings you closer to collapse. Because life wants wholeness, and there is only wholeness when there is unity. Last principle, gender. Everything has masculine and feminine. Within you, these forces are at war. You act, but you don't feel. Or you feel, but you don't act. You protect, but you don't welcome. Or you welcome, but you nullify yourself. Jesus was not only strength, he was gentleness. He was not only authority, he was listening. Jung called this integration, the internal marriage between anima and animus, the fusion of polarities within the self. And you still live in pieces, pretending you are whole, but you are not. And that is why your soul cries out. That is why your relationships collapse. That is why your cycles repeat themselves. You need to rebuild yourself from the inside out, not with ready-made phrases, but with silence, with presence, with real pain. Jung said, "Depression is like a lady dressed in black. If she shows up, don't turn her away. Invite her in, offer her a chair, treat her like a guest, and listen to what she has to say. Maybe your suffering isn't a mistake. Maybe it's an invitation. The question is, are you going to continue ignoring this visitor? Or will you open the door and face everything you've tried to forget?" Carl Jung didn't want to comfort you. He wanted to tear you apart, because only what bleeds heals. While modern psychology is concerned with erasing symptoms, Jung walked in the opposite direction. He listened to the delirium. He analyzed the nightmare. He plunged into the dark silence of the soul. And from there he brought back answers that no manual could explain. And one of those answers was this: Jesus did not come to found a religion. He came to awaken the collective unconscious. And for that, he was crucified. Because the truth he carried was unbearable for a world trained to obey, repeat, and forget. But that truth is alive. Codified in the 7 Hermetic principles, embodied in every gesture, every miracle, every metaphor he uttered. Jesus was an initiator, Jung, a decipherer. And the meeting point between the two is the self. The self is the psychic center, the totality, the fusion of shadow and light, flesh and spirit, memory and destiny. But to access it, you must do what you fear most: enter the desert. The inner desert is not the emptiness of loneliness. It is the journey through deconstruction. It is when the ego loses its arguments, when your certainties dissolve, and you find yourself naked before yourself. Jesus went into the desert before beginning his mission. Jung went through his own collapse, what he called confrontation with the unconscious. And you try to avoid it. But the desert comes, disguised as an existential crisis, a broken relationship, bankruptcy, depression, and you call it bad luck, when in fact it is symbolic mercy, because collapse is the door. And after it, the return begins, but not a return to what you were. It is a return to what you never ceased to be, but forgot. The self is not at the top. It is at the bottom. It does not shout. It whispers. And that whisper can only be heard when everything else is silent. It is at this point that Hermetic principles cease to be ideas and become flesh. Mentalism, for example, forces you to assume the life I live is the exact reflection of what I think. You can say you love. But if your mind vibrates with control, jealousy, and insecurity, you are creating prison, not love. You can say you believe, but if you vibrate with doubt with every decision, there is no faith, only repetition of fear with pretty words. Jesus did not say, feel. He said, believe. Because belief is a choice, it is internal discipline. It is the alignment of the mind with the source. The principle of correspondence forces you to look at the world as a mirror. What is out of order outside reveals the disorder within. If your love life is a minefield, look at your affection for yourself. If your money slips away, look at how you manage your energy. If your health breaks down, observe how you run away from your truths. Nothing is external. Everything is a reflection. And when you start to reorganize within, the chaos outside realigns itself. But the ego hates this process because it requires surrender, and the ego only knows how to fight. Jung said, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves." This phrase seems simple, but it is a complete map for returning to the self. Everything that hurts you points to what still bleeds within you. Everything you judge shows what has been repressed in you. Everything you love reveals what wants to expand in you. And it is in this process that the principle of polarity teaches you. Don't reject your shadow. It is half of your wholeness. Jesus embraced lepers. He walked with sinners. He entered the temple and broke down structures with holy fury, not because he was contradictory, but because he was whole. He was yin and yang, the sun and the night, the sword and the balm. And you? You hide from your fury. You pretend you have forgiven. You act spiritual. But deep down, you are fragmented. The self only appears when you stop pretending, when you sit in silence and say, "I don't know. I'm lost. I'm not who I thought I was." That moment is the symbolic baptism, the submersion into the unconscious, the death of the character. After that comes the beginning of rhythm. You understand that pain has cycles, that you don't have to resist, that everything flows and everything returns. You learn to allow yourself, not to rush, to listen to the silences, and then finally, cause and effect reveal themselves in a different light. Not as punishment, but as a fair consequence of what your soul vibrates. You stop blaming, you begin to understand, and life begins to cooperate. Finally, the principle of gender. You integrate the masculine that acts with the feminine that feels. You begin to create with balance, to attract with presence, to take care of yourself like a wise father and an intuitive mother. You stop looking outside yourself, and you begin to inhabit the center. This center is the self, and the self is where Jung and Jesus meet. You have spent your life trying to be good enough to be loved, good enough to be accepted, good enough to feel that you deserve to be here. But in the silence, you know, none of that was enough, because the emptiness that accompanies you is not a lack of love. It is a lack of meaning, and meaning is not sought outside. It is remembered within. Carl Jung knew, you are not what others see. It is what watches you when everyone else is gone. It is what questions you when you say everything is fine. It is what cries, even when your body smiles. That something is the self. And the self does not ask you for perfection. It asks you for truth. You did not come to earth to follow rules, nor to please expectations. You came to integrate, to tear off the mask, to find yourself in the midst of your own contradiction. Jesus never wanted blind followers. He wanted awakened ones, beings who knew what they were doing because they looked inside and saw the abyss. And even so, they decided to cross it. The 7 Hermetic principles are not magic formulas. They are mirrors. And every mirror you avoid is a part of you that rots away in oblivion. Have you ever stopped to ask why the same pains return? Why do cycles repeat themselves? Why, no matter how much you achieve, is there always something missing? The answer lies within you, in the part you locked away, in the part you repressed, in the part you swore to bury. But that continues to whisper inside your chest. Jesus said, "You will know the truth, and the truth will set you free." But Jung adds, "The truth will not come from outside. It will be born when you are ready to break down." You need to break down. You need to get rid of the image, the idea, the persona. You need to say, enough. Enough of pretending. Enough of mutilating yourself to fit into places that don't see you. Enough of chasing approval when what your soul wants is presence. There is no path to God that does not pass through you, through your unconscious, through your wounds, through the monsters you buried in the garden of childhood. The true spiritualist does not run away from the shadow. The true spiritualist does not run away from the shadow. He dances with it, he listens to it, he honors it, he transforms it into a bridge, and that is why Jung did not offer relief. He offered confrontation. Do you want to save yourself? Then stop. Now. Breathe. Feel the nameless pain that is inside you. Feel the fear of being who you are. Feel the shame of not having been loved the way you needed to be. And after that, stay. Stay in the discomfort. Stay in the silence. Stay in the desert, because that is where the self is born. In the space between what you were and what you decide to be now. It's not about understanding everything. It's about stopping running away. It's about looking in the mirror and no longer seeing an imposter, but a fragment of the divine. You don't need more answers. You need a new center, a place where neither miracles nor absence can take you away from yourself. Like this, if you're back. Comment if you're still on the way. And share with those who have forgotten the sound of their own soul and need to remember before it's too late.